Welcome to On Farm. It's Anna here with you today. Monty is currently halfway through his chemo and radiotherapy for the brain tumour that we told you about a couple of weeks ago. He's been absent from the podcast for quite a number of weeks, as you will have noticed. So we thought we'd mark that by replaying one of his favourite episodes so that you get the chance to hear his voice again. Back in July, Monty spent some time with Dr. Keith Dawson, who is one of the founders of the charity Pickups for Peace, as well as charity supporter Nicola Alexander. The episode was actually recorded at Nicola's farm in Fife, where there was a pickup truck and aid all set to travel on an aid convoy to Ukraine. Because basically that's what Pickups for Peace do. They collect farm trucks and 4x4 vehicles, pack them with aid, supplies and equipment, and then drive them in convoy to Ukraine. And in fact, one friend of the podcast, Ed Smith from Norvite Feeds, took a truck in a very recent convoy. So well done, Ed, and your team. I think wife Lorna accompanied him as well. So you are a very kind and brave pair. Well done. The trucks are then left in Ukraine to help the war effort, moving people, recovering casualties and transporting supplies. So I hope you enjoy this pod, and I'm sure Keith and the team would be really pleased to hear from you if you'd like to donate or volunteer to make a future trip happen.
Hello, it's Monty here for this episode of On Farm, the Food, Agriculture and Rural Matters podcast.
Beautiful day to set off through the Scottish borders on the first leg of our journey to the Newcastle to Amsterdam ferry.
In this episode, we're going to share recordings from a convoy of much-needed trucks being driven from Scotland and the rest of the UK over to Ukraine by a farmer-led charity.
23 vehicles have been delivered this week, and now we are going to be delivering our 140th vehicle filled with aid supplies, which are very gratefully received by the Ukrainians for help in both humanitarian and military efforts.
This is Keith Dawson for Pickups for Peace.
We'll hear more of the clips peppered through the episode. Keith Dawson is a well-kent face and voice for many in Scottish agriculture. He's a founder and organiser of the charity Pickups for Peace, and he's also a clever and trusted agronomist and has also had a long career with SAC Consulting. Keith also has a big connection with Ukraine. Before the war, he was part of a team setting up and running Europe's biggest regenerative farm. The war in Ukraine is very personal for Keith.
A long journey ahead of us of about 1,800 miles, but a good, committed team of local heroes driving across Europe to deliver help and moral support to the Ukrainians.
This is an important and insightful episode, I hope you agree. But it's only made possible with the support of our on-farm sponsors. And I'm going to credit them all in this episode. Bell Ingram, Gillespie McAndrew, Laurie Symington, massive thanks to you. We can only do things like this and speak to Pickups for Peace and other charities and promote their work because of our sponsors. We're actually standing here. We're in a steading building near Cooper in Fife, and we're standing beside a pickup truck. We're standing beside a Mitsubishi L200, slightly elderly truck, but this truck has got a second life ahead of itself now, and this truck is going to be a lifesaver. Keith, you were one of the founders of Pickups for Peace. Tell us, where did it come from and what it's all about and what you've maybe achieved to date?
Well, Mark Laird and I, one of the other founders, have been farming in Ukraine for nearly 20 years, and we've been always impressed by the hospitality and the fellowship that we've had with the Ukrainians. So when the war first started in 2014, not 2022, we were horrified at what was happening, and we started our aid efforts then. Obviously, that was intensified on February the 25th, 2022, and we asked ourselves, what can we do? And very quickly, we started doing a number of things like providing equipment for the locals to help build roadblocks, and also supplied potatoes and seed potatoes for locals, because food is absolutely critical, and farming is very critical to the Ukrainian economy now, even more so since Putin has grasped all the mining and metal works over in the east. So farming farming is very, very important, and the land is very important to the soul of the Ukrainians, with the history that they've had of oppression and genocides in the past. So we asked ourselves, what could we do? So we continued, and we donated, with the help of Caledonian March in Stirling, 3 pickup vehicles to help with humanitarian, rescue wounded, rescue civilians, and deliver supplies. Two of those, within 6 months, had been destroyed by Russian artillery in separate incidents. So we said to ourselves, we must try and replace these. And then, I guess, over a few beers and discussions, we came up with this crazy idea of, well, why don't we not just replace them, but why don't we go for 100 vehicles? A crazy pie in the sky idea, but we thought we'd give it a go and test the resolve and the support of the farming community. And wow, have we been surprised by the way it's taken off, and the genuine feeling and generosity of the whole farming and agricultural community in Scotland and wider afield.
We have now left the ferry in Amsterdam. We have been very well received by the customs officials, with thumbs up, and even one motorbiker gave us a €20 donation for diesel. Our journey takes us through the Netherlands, through Germany, and into Poland this evening. As we journey through with our vehicles and supplies in convoys, groups of 3 or 4, about 23 vehicles going through, and we are meaning to go across Europe to Poland this evening.
Initially, we reached out to friends and family, and then it got a momentum all of its own. Once we'd taken the first convoy across of 25 vehicles back in March.
That was March 2023.
Yes, that's correct, yes. Yeah. So those people who had driven on that had such a remarkable experience, a whole emotional roller coaster in their trip across Europe, on the ferry, and then driving across Europe and delivering Lviv, meeting the soldiers there, meeting the humanitarians there, and seeing also the graves of the soldiers who'd been killed in the conflict. This remarkable story and experiences spread. These ambassadors from the first trip carried that on. We had one young man who'd only had his license for 6 months, and he drove across Europe with his father. One of the first group from 18 years old to 75, and he said, "This, Keith, is life-changing for me." He then went back and raised enough money for another pickup, and it's been on 4 of the convoys since then. So people have been very affected by this experience, and it's something that's unique for people, I think, and it's spread, and through various media and people like yourselves, the word has got around, and it's really tapped into, I think, a need for the farming community in particular. People want to do something, but they don't know quite what to do. Some have taken Ukrainians into their homes, but here is a very tangible thing, whether it's putting some money in to buy a spade or a jerry can, or providing a vehicle, or putting money in towards a vehicle. It's not very often in the farming community we get the chance to save lives, but these are saving lives in a very real sense. And I think even if one vehicle saves one life, we're now at the stage where we've got 160 vehicles have been delivered. That's 160 Christmas tables where there will be somebody at that table who wouldn't have been there otherwise. And these vehicles are each saving far more than just one life. And we hope that those the efforts that we've had here and the supplies that we're providing will save many more lives in the future.
So we're now at the Ukrainian border. Our 23 vehicles are all assembled and through the Polish border with the help of the local mayor, and to the Ukrainian border now, where we will travel under police escort, everybody along the roads giving their respects and pulling over, and as we go through the villages to deliver our vehicles to Lviv, a city of 1 million people, a beautiful city, UNESCO World Heritage Site. We travelled across Europe. Only one of our vehicles broke down, and no one is left behind on these journeys, so the team got together and towed it and got the vehicle fixed, and it continued on its way. the great esprit de corps amongst these teams that we've had across in what is now our 5th convoy is a joy to behold. Everybody getting on from 18 to 80, driving across Europe, delivering these vehicles to save lives, which they do on a regular basis, working with humanitarian organisations and the military to rescue villagers, rescue the wounded, and mine clearances, drone squads, and also supplying medical supplies throughout the areas that need them, particularly the Eastern Front and Bakhmut, with the regiment that we've been working with there.
I'm Nicola Alexander, and I was the driver in the 2nd convoy from Edinburgh out to Ukraine.
Nicola, you were one of these people that maybe Keith is referring to. So it started off with Keith and a couple of friends who were already out there with Ukrainian connections, coming over here and maybe roping in some of their friends and going out with a convoy. And then the word spread, because people came back from that and said it was such a necessary thing to do. And I'm right in saying that you then took part in the 2nd convoy.
Yes, that's right, I did. And I think there's a lot of people out there that want to help in some way and just aren't all that sure and kind of what they could do. And for me, I had helped out in Errol, sorting out clothing, and my daughter, she did a lot of voluntary work there with school as well. My husband went on the first trip, and he came back and had said what an amazing experience it was. And he thought that, you know, I would get a lot out of doing it myself. I know Mark very well, and I got in touch with him and asked if I could be a part of driving one of the 2nd vehicles. As the time got closer to going, I just felt a little bit more nervous. And I think it was more about driving on the other side of the road than anything else. We drove from here down to Hull on the first day. The group that were travelling from Scotland met on the ferry that evening. You kind of think it's such a small world. There was probably about 12 or 13 of us on the ferry. And in some way there was a connection with everybody that was there who I hadn't met before. We arrived in Rotterdam the next morning, about 8 o'clock in the morning. And it was actually just as we were getting onto the ferry, when we were handing over our passports, the lady did say, "You do realise that you're going to a war zone, don't you?"
How did that make you feel?
A little bit nervous at the time, but...
Because you're a mother, you've got some youngish children, as it were, and what have you, and it is going into a war zone.
Yes, you're right, it is. For me, it was just something that I felt I really wanted to do. I just wanted to help. And being in this country, for me, it just wasn't... I wasn't able to do enough. I just wanted to do more. And so when this opportunity arose, I thought, yeah, that's for me. I like an adventure. And I was sure that I wanted to go. And actually, for me, the feeling, it just kind of changed as soon as you crossed that border and went into Ukraine. You could see vehicles, people still leaving the country. Do you know, you could just see the sadness in their faces.
That must be hellish, seeing people leaving, seeing people fleeing. There's people leaving their homes, leaving their farms, leaving everything behind to get out.
We have now safely delivered all 23 vehicles for pickups for peace to the governor's offices in Lviv. Very humbly and gratefully received, and as one of the governor's staff said, it's not just supplies you are bringing, it's also all the support and motivation to know that there are people who are prepared to drive across Europe to deliver supplies and vehicles to us, and that motivation gives us strength. Difficult times, and this morning, after we dropped the vehicles off, we walked past the funeral cortege for 3 young men who were killed in the last few days in Bakhmut. We're going through the town square, and we stopped the traffic. 8 vehicles behind, buses full of family mourners, a lot of people affected, directly and also indirectly by losses of loved ones and family at the front. And the last post was played as the whole community in the centre of the city stood to attention in silence to respect the fallen. Our supplies will help reduce that. Everything from combat tourniquets to trauma kit to generators, supplies, tools, and a lot of other medical supplies are being provided, as well as the pickups which are used to transport things around at the front.
We were shown around the range at the army base. There was an awful lot of wounded soldiers. We were shown how they threw hand grenades and fired missiles and machine guns.
Oh, pretty real that, isn't it, to see that? Yeah.
Unbelievably real, yeah. The thing is, a lot of these soldiers, especially at the beginning of the war, they were training for a week before they were put in the front line, just a week.
So they were civilians. They were every day, whatever they were doing, and then they had a week's training before going to the front line.
Yes, that's right. 1 week's training before they were in the front line. I think now they're able to give them about 3 or 4 weeks training before they go to the front line. But it's just unbelievable that this is happening. We also saw the damage. A drone had landed on one of their buildings, and just seeing the destruction from one drone was just incredible. We spoke to a lot of the soldiers. We had a lovely dinner with them that evening. I felt very privileged. I think I was the last one to arrive down to dinner, and opposite was a soldier called Yuri, who he used to be a farmer. This night, I think I was up until about 3 o'clock in the morning, just speaking to these soldiers. There was one guy there, I think he was about 18, who was in crutches, and that there was he was on the front line. Again, he'd been training for a week at the training camp. A hand grenade had landed in front of him, which hadn't exploded. And he's a young guy. He hadn't had much training. He picked it up. He took it down to the bunker because he thought, we can use this against the Russians. And it exploded in the bunker. It killed 7 of his mates. It's just horrific, the things that are happening. There was another soldier that I spoke to.
That guy's going to be mentally scarred.
Yeah.
That's awful to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. This other soldier I spoke to, he just had so much anger about the whole thing. He's lost his house. He's managed to get his wife and children out to safety. I think they're now living in Norway somewhere, but he's fighting in the war, and his daughter saw her best friend being shot in the head. And, when you hear these stories, you just, it's devastating.
It's devastating to think it's only a pickup drive away. It's not the other side of the world. It's not something that is so far away we don't even need to think about it. What you guys are doing is taking stuff out there in the back of, like this pickup here, for example. I don't mean to be disparaging to whoever donated that, but that doesn't really look like it would make it round the farm. I know it's going to be worked on, etc., but that's going to go out there, and this war zone is only a drive away in that pickup.
This is only 15 hours drive from the Channel, this war. So it's not a continent away, it's very real, and the gratitude and fellowship of the Ukrainians for these vehicles and the supplies is tremendous. It's very moving. I get very emotional about it. They're so grateful to the support that we give. The Chief of Staff from the 24th Brigade that we're been very involved in and delivered the first 100 vehicles to, said to me, you're bringing a lot of supplies and you're bringing the vehicles, but even more important than that, you're bringing a morale boost and a motivation there that all our soldiers can see, and our humanitarian workers and our civilians can see that they're not forgotten, and that there are people who are prepared to drive across Europe to help them.
You're getting a bit emotional about that, Keith, but
Yeah.
I can totally see why.
Well, that's right, and I'm sure Nicola would echo my sentiments. When we drive from the border into Lviv or to the compound, there are people stopped by the side of the road, saluting us. There are cars on the other side of the road pulled across in deference to us and respect. And that gratitude is echoed all the way through Ukraine, right to the local government who are delighted to have some of the vehicles to help with their humanitarian aids and helping the civilians as well.
Tell us about what the pickups are and what it means to them, what they're doing with them, and why it's so important that they receive pickups and things, and the other things that go with them.
Yeah, well, they're used for a range of purposes, humanitarian purposes. Some of the organisations we're involved with are humanitarian. A lot go to the military, and they're rescuing civilians from the front as the front moves backwards and forwards. They're taking wounded back to the field hospital, so they're very much saving lives. One of the things that's been donated for £30 is a combat tourniquet, which can save the blood loss. It can be put on with one hand and can save a life, and then the people are taken back more quickly to the field hospitals in the background. They're also involved in taking teams that are clearing mines, because almost 20% of the farmland now is denied to farming because of either munitions or minefields or the war going on there. And that's going to have a major effect, continuing effect on food price inflation and food security with that 20%. The other things it's been used, for example, some were used in helping people at the Kakova Dam recently, in bringing, all of you will have seen the flooding there and the desperately dreadful eco-crisis that's caused. I've been on some of those fields that were underwater, and some of the best soils in the world there, and it's really a crime against humanity that's now been ruined, and a lot of that topsoil will have been washed out in the Black Sea. These sort of operations are there. They're also used for drone units, and some of them have been used for mounting anti-missile defences on the back of to try and stop. And the air defences there have been very effective, but targeting of missiles, a few still get through and kill civilians. And the usage of these vehicles is very widespread, and we know that now that the 160, they don't last forever.
Can I ask about that? That's you've delivered 160 vehicles now. How many of those are still functioning, do you reckon?
Most of them are lasting over 3 months, but in that time they're doing fantastic work. And I think all of us have, as we've driven there, particularly as we got near the border or driving behind the police escort into Lviv, have been with our hands on the wheel thinking, whose hands will be on the wheel next and what will they be facing? And they're facing these dangers and these horrific situations for us as well as themselves, because there's no doubt in my mind that they are fighting for democracy and the rights of people throughout Europe. One of the motivations that I have for doing this is I have 3 young granddaughters, and I want them to grow up in a world where the rule of law and international regulations and civility is obeyed. I grew up during the Cold War, and I can still remember what it was like in those days. And I don't want our children and grandchildren to have to live through that. So these people are fighting for all of us, and we owe it to them, with all the horrible things that they're going through, to help them in any way we can. And this is Pickups for Peace is a very real way of helping them, whether it's donating a small amount of money to help towards a tank of diesel or a shovel that can go in the back of it, or donating a vehicle in itself. There's so many difficult and doom and gloom stories in the industry and the farming industry at the moment, that here is a really good news story of the community coming together and making a real difference. And I can assure you, saving lives. That there's no doubt. We talk to the people who've got these vehicles at the front as we deliver the next thing, and they say, how many lives have been saved by these vehicles, and it's a really positive step that the whole community is engaging in. And I think Scotland and obviously parts of England that we're getting the vehicles from as well can be very proud of what they've done, and Scotland is certainly punching above its weight in terms of supporting the Ukrainians.
Having had a tour with a guide around the beautiful city of Lviv, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, to tell us of the history and the difficult times that have already occurred in the previous centuries. We are now travelling back by foot through the border at Medica to get our air travel from Krakow and Rzeszów back to the UK, walking through Medica, the same crossing point that we all saw on the news in the early days of the war, that was mobbed by people fleeing the conflict. And as we walked through today, we thought of the young mother with 2 children, carrying all her worldly possessions in 2 or 3 bags, leaving her husband behind to fight at the front and not knowing if she would ever see him again. And a truly humbling experience. Everybody has found a roller coaster of emotions on this journey, but know they are doing a fantastic job in terms of helping the people of Ukraine in the brave fight for us all.
I'm very proud, and I hope anyone listening to this is, I'm very proud that you guys are doing this on behalf of, shall we say it's on behalf of Scottish farmers? It's everyone that's donating, everyone that's supporting, but you know, in a way, you're flying the flag for Scottish farmers out there, and I think that's a wonderful thing to be doing.
That's great. Whether you're putting in a 5 or a tenner, the more we can do now, the more lives will be saved, and the sooner this dreadful war will finish and we can get back to rebuilding. Because one of the problems, I think, in Ukraine will be, as you've alluded to, Monty, is the mental health problems that will be there from the front, from the civilians who've been there every night, having missile alerts and being woken up almost like an 18-month sleep deprivation exercise and experiment.
A lot of these farmers, they've got a lot of stuff in their sheds that could be of huge use out there. They're in desperate need of tyres. One of the pickups just had tyres alone in it. They go through tyres incredibly quickly. The amount of kind of shrapnel on the roads out there, I mean, tyres are being destroyed constantly. We also...
So it's one thing taking a pickup out like this one, but actually they need things to keep the pickups going as well. Tyres and whatever else.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would love people listening to this podcast to think about that and try and do this, because, you know, as we all know, things are lying around in sheds and things are in workshops and whatever. Are you really going to need it? Are you really going to use it? In Ukraine, it'll be used.
It's the sort of things that most farmers are walking past in their workshop every day and can make such a difference on the front line. Some of the things that we take for granted are desperately needed there in short supply. And I think, you know, if you're looking at your pickup in the yard, we've taken some pickups out there. We want ones that work, but I took an old Land Rover Defender, which didn't have an MOT previously, that was donated by the Milnes from this county of Fife, and I wondered whether it would get across the Scottish border, let alone the Ukrainian border, but as it cleared its sinuses, as it drove through Scotland to the ferry and then through the lowlands, it got better and better. It was like a fine wine, and by the time it got to the border, it was really going well. So even the ones that have been sitting around on the farm or just driving around on the farm, give a consideration to letting us have them. And I think the important thing is also that we are a charity, so you can gift aid that, and obviously it can. There's a number of ways that these can be worked through the accounts to make sure that it's giving the best value to both ends of the deal.
It seems like a big thing to give away a vehicle, a perfectly good vehicle or a vehicle that's got a life in it. But, you know, you maybe have something that's been written down in the accounts. You maybe have something that actually on your books is now worth nothing and it owes you nothing. And you're talking about a Land Rover Defender. Just give us a bit more about that. So it's not just the charity is called Pickups for Peace, but you're looking for what? Any 4x4?
All 4x4s are very useful, and that we've taken a wide range of vehicles across there. Some of them we've painted green in camouflage, and some have gone in their natural colours. So yeah, have a think. And it's also a number of you could get together and put 1,000 in, and we can buy the pickup for you, because there's some pickups out there. I hope we're not by buying them all. We're putting the market price up. But so far that doesn't seem to have happened. But certainly band together, and if you each put 1,000 in, again, that can be gift aided, and we can buy a pickup on your behalf and take it across.
Crass as it might sound, I want to slightly move away from the human aspect of it, because we've got Keith Dawson, and Keith has been renowned over many years as an agronomist, figure with SAC, and farming out in Ukraine. So Keith, you of all people know or knew or are aware of the massive potential out there and what's being lost and what's being lost from the food chain. You're as much as anyone can bring us up to speed on that.
Yes, well, I remember back in 2005 when Mark and I and George Taylor of Tayside...
So we've referred to Mark a bit in this podcast. That's Mark Laird, who is in the Central Plains group with you and is one of the founders of Pickups for Peace. Yeah,
That's correct, yeah. We're out there digging in the snow, scraping the snow off and digging the first soil samples from the land we were looking at. And we saw in the west of Ukraine thousands upon thousands of hectares which were just going to rack and ruin after the dissolution of the centralised farms and the Soviet rule, the collective farms, which had just been given to each villager 1 or 2 hectares from the 20,000 or 30,000 that a collective farm might be. And some had been tilled for a few years, but gradually that had run down. And the soils are fantastic. What Mark and I spotted in those years, we developed successful businesses in Poland, but the opportunities for expansion were not there. We saw this juxtaposition of excellent soils, not the best soils in Ukraine, but as good as anything in Scotland at Arbroath on the Golden Mile, and also the juxtaposition with the rainfall from the Carpathian Mountains, whereas in the east of Ukraine, you're talking about great soils, but maybe only in the old money 12 inches of rainfall. Here we had 36 inches of rainfall, and we could grow potatoes without irrigation there. So there was also almost a moral imperative to try and do something here and develop and regenerate the agriculture. And we built up a business of from 90 hectares of potatoes to start with. I remember going to my bank manager to borrow my initial 60k for an investment, telling him I was putting an extension up. I didn't tell him the extension was going to be in Ukraine, but he didn't need to know that. And we were successful in that first year with 90 hectares, and we built up to a business with acquisition which was 200,000 hectares and the largest regenerative farming business in Europe. And then we sold that after launching it on the stock exchange, and we set up Central Plains Group, which has got basically a model of growing potatoes and taking them to make starch, and also biopolymers for things like biodegradable plastic and other feedstock for industrial processes in a very green and circular economy. So we're looking to the future there, and Ukraine has a future. The people are amazing, the soils are amazing, and agriculture will be very important. And we certainly in Central Plains Group want to play a key role in that, in the rehabilitation. And we believe that Scotland has a role here in helping to rebuild Ukrainian agriculture as well, through world famous institutes like the James Hutton Institute and SAC, as well as Central Plains Group.
Just coming in on that, from the farming point of view, because you have many years and you've been advising farmers in Scotland. You are a renowned agronomist, but you sort of, for want of a better way of putting it, you kind of bet your shirt on Ukraine. You went out there and you invested, and it grew, and you saw the potential, and you've grown something out there. You can sense your anger when you talk about it like that.
Well, back in 2022, as many farmers will realise, February the 25th, that's the sort of the timing in the annual cycle of farming that you're looking to the decisions to plant. What are you going to plant? That year, we had a big decision to make in Central Plains Group. Should we plant at all? Who was going to harvest it? Would it be the Russians harvesting our crop at the end of the day? It took us about 5 minutes as a management team to come to a decision that we had to plant in an act of faith and defiance, faith in the local team and a defiant gesture towards the Russians. As time went on, our incredible local team there, showing the spirit of the Ukrainians, brought that crop through to a successful harvest. And during COVID and then the war, we built a starch processing factory, which is producing some of the highest quality starch for biopolymers and other uses in Europe. So it's a real testament to the Ukrainians. And the war will end, and there will be opportunities in Ukraine again, and particularly in Lviv Oblast, which is in the west, where a lot of businesses have moved, and where we farmed and have farmed successfully for almost 20 years. And we will need it all, because every morning there's another 150,000 net mouths to feed in the world, and food security and the tightness of supply and demand is still there. Ukraine has a powerful role to play, and certainly Scotland has a role in partnership with Ukraine to help build that.
That is really interesting, to put it in the terms that Scotland has a partnership. Again, maybe from a farming point of view, you almost think of people, and you can't speak about the Ukrainians like this given they're in a war zone, but you think of people over the seas as being your competitors. But let's look at what we've got here in terms of, you mentioned James Hutton, you mentioned SAC. We've got knowledge to trade as well. We've not just got to worry about whether they can sell potatoes more cheaply than we have or whatever. We've got expertise and knowledge that are valuable to people all over the globe, and particularly in rebuilding somewhere like Ukraine.
Well, that's right. 4th of July, we have Arable Scotland up at Dundee. In early August, we have Potatoes in Practice. So Scotland is a world leader in terms of its technology. And our success, I suppose, in Ukraine was bringing this Scottish technology and using the soils and the rainfall of Ukraine and the motivated workforce we found out there to develop a successful business. As I say, it became the largest regenerative farming operation in Europe. In the days before we knew what regenerative farming was, but we built the soil structure up and we built the organic matter up in the soils by using sound principles based on centuries of expertise from Scotland, back to the founder of geology and a farmer himself, James Hutton.
Yeah, we've touched on James Hutton in previous episodes with Denise Daly-Walton of the Nature Friendly Farming Network, and I think if anyone's listening and wants to maybe go back to that episode, that was a really enthusiastic discussion about that. I want to bring in Nicola just back to the pickup thing, and we're standing beside a pickup. Nicola, are you going to drive this one out?
I'm not sure I'm actually going to drive that one out, Monty, but I'm definitely hoping to go back in September.
Would you encourage people that you're talking about September? And I know for security reasons, there's never a sort of talk of a convoy leaving on a certain date or arriving on a certain date. I get all of that, but we're talking at the moment about September. Are you looking for donations? Are you quite happy to take donations here? Are you encouraging other people?
Absolutely. Donations are always welcome. I'm more than happy for people to come and donate here, or if they get in touch with someone from Pickups for Peace, they will get back to you as to where your kind of nearest destination would be to drop goods off. But yeah, we're constantly looking for more things. And
that's all on Pickups for Peace website?
Yes, it is indeed. There's links there. If you do hashtag Pickups for Peace, you'll get a lot of information there. Or email pickupsforpeace@memus.com. That's MEMUS.com.
And we will stick all of that in the show notes to this, and you'll find links, and we shall certainly use that hashtag when we're promoting this episode, so look out for it. Just one last thing before we kind of wrap up about supporters. You've landed a corporate supporter in, is it Trinity Grain, Keith?
Yes, that's correct. We've been very happy to be engaged with them, and they've been good donators and have donated funds for a number of vehicles. And I say back in the early days, last June, before Pickups for Peace had been set up, Caledonian Marts helped to seed, along with Central Plains Group, the initial 3 vehicles that got us all thinking. So, corporate sponsors are very welcome, or individual sponsors just giving a few pounds towards a shovel or a combat tourniquet, for example, which would save a life.
If you're listening to this and you want to get involved, you want to help, or you know someone that should support, please pass on the message. Please pass on the podcast. So, massive thanks. Massive thanks to everything that you guys do, Keith and team. Massive thanks to Nicola for going out there and for obviously being so keen to encourage others, and for looking like you're going again. And massive thanks for speaking to us today.
Thank you, Monty.
Thank you very much.
Before we finish this episode, I'll thank again our sponsors, Gillespie McAndrew, Bale Ingram, Laurie and Symington. None of this is possible without them. And as a reminder, in case you haven't listened, Pickups for Peace was one of the ideas that was put forward to us in our previous episode, our 150th episode of On Farm. We were at the Highland Show asking people to pitch a pod, i.e. tell us about something that they thought was worth recording as a podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, which was the result of that. And of course, we don't just want you to listen to the episode, we don't just want you to be aware of Pickups for Peace. If at all possible, we would love it if you could support them. So do look for the link in the show notes, along with this episode, for how you can support Pickups for Peace in any way possible. Donations of cash, tools, vehicles, anything from a ratchet strap to a shovel to a bucket, all the things that we might have, even lying around in a farmsteading, we might take for granted, we might never use, but they could be very useful in Ukraine. And I'll just finish now by reminding you again, as I always do, On Farm, these podcasts are made by our team at Scene&HerdPR and Marketing. And with that, that's it from me. Bye for now.